All right, Nick, let's talk about the Oregon Ducks. Big matchup, and it is big for many, many ways this year. Oregon versus Oregon State is going to be a matchup for the ages this year. There's a lot on the line. There's a lot Oregon can gain. There's a lot Oregon can lose, and there's a lot of history, both in the past for this team, but there's also a lot of future stuff going on as far as the organization goes. We have a really great snippets from Dan Lanning's press conference on this, and we're going to get into that, and we can just talk about everything Oregon versus Oregon State on the other side. The first part of this, Nick, that I thought was very interesting is the revenge aspect, I guess you would say, for Oregon. Obviously, Oregon State plays spoiler for Oregon last year. They got the best of them in that one, and it kind of has been on the back of everyone's minds all season long getting up to this point. And when asked, they asked Dan Lanning, how much does that loss from last year resonate with this team still, and how much do you want to use that as motivation? And Lanning, being the motivator he is, he says, I think it already resonates with every single one of us and certainly not far from our minds. They're certainly a good team, and we've got to play really well to compete against them, and you have to play the entire game because we all know what can happen if you don't play all 4 quarters in a tough rivalry game like this. But Dan Lanning, he's already got this game in the back of everyone's mind. It's been there all season, but specifically right now, this team needs to keep going because this is the pinnacle matchup for them. To beat Oregon State, get them into the Pac-12 championship, rematch versus Washington, that is their line to the college football playoff. That's the only way they're going to make it there, if they can make it there. But I think that gives them a pretty good shot at potentially being the one-loss team to go into the college football playoff. But there's more from Lanning as well. They asked him, how important is it for you guys to continue to schedule this game going forward? Everyone knows the Ducks are leaving the Pac-12, and this is a big point of contention because that would kind of disband this rivalry game at the time. I think it's really important, and Lanning says, I think games like this are really important, and it'd be great if there's some way that we can make that happen and continue to make that happen. I know everybody on our end would love to see that continue, so that feels good if you're an Oregon fan, that Lanning and this team, they really want to keep the rivalry going somehow. You know, there's other teams like Carolina and Clemson. They're not in the same divisions as well. SEC, ACC, they still manage to make that game happen every year. So there's something that can be used there as well. And I think now, finally, the third thing he talked about, there's many other things, but this one I found really interesting. And it was a question about the two Ugalagale. If I pronounced that wrong, I apologize. But DJ and Mateo, the two brothers, both on opposite sides of the ball, both on opposite teams. Mateo plays for Oregon, DJ plays for Oregon State. And he asked, with Mateo going up against his brother DJ, what have you told him this week in preparation? Again, Lanning says, hit your brother, go hit your brother. He said they're both great competitors, and I think they're probably excited to compete against each other. They're both really talented players. There's not a bigger game than that, and they both know that. And Mateo certainly knows that. So it'll be fun for him to go out there and compete, and it's fun for his family. He's got a great family, and I'm excited to see them get at it. But Nick, I think this is pretty cool. Two brothers, opposite side of the ball. Dan Lanning just using that motivation to say, hey, go get your brother and win this game. There's a lot on riding on your shoulders here, and you're going to be able to make some big plays for us. So a lot of stuff going on for this Oregon State game, and I want to know what you think about these comments and anything else Oregon State. But Oregon fans, in the comments below, let us know, what do you think the score of the game is going to be this year? Can Oregon rectify the loss from last year? Let us know in the comments below. But Nick, what do you think about everything Oregon State?
So I think what we're seeing from Dan Lanning, and we've talked about it earlier this season, I think we've done a couple of videos on this. Lanning, I think at this point, has set himself clearly as the best motivator in college football. And look, for college football, less so than the NFL, but certainly for college, motivation really matters. And I know all the fans, all the outsiders are looking at these players as they head into these rivalry matchups, potential conference title games, maybe college football playoff implications, whether they're in or out. And they're thinking these players are so motivated, they're so gung-ho. The reality is, and I say this all the time on this channel, I played college football. This time of the year, you're exhausted as a player. You're worn out. You almost want the season to end. You've had summer workouts, training camp, weeks and weeks and weeks of game plans, practices, games, film reviews, coaches yelling at you, things like that. You've had class is hard, right? You're tired, you've been away from home. Everyone wants to kind of go home. It's cold, it's wet, you're feeling the holidays right around the corner, right? You lose motivation. It's really easy to do. And I feel like coaches really screw up because sometimes when they're asked with these rivalry matchups, we hear it all the time. The coaches speak. They're like, well, we're just treating this as another game. It's just part of the process. And look, for the NFL, for professionals, that makes sense. But for college, you got to give these kids something to be motivated about, a reason to keep grinding, even though they're all exhausted and worn out this time of year. And Lanning is showing it right here. He's sitting there saying, listen, no, this is a big deal. We want revenge. Revenge is on our mind. Think about that for a second, Mice. I don't think I've ever heard a big time coach talk about revenge and getting back from a loss from a prior year in terms of a current matchup. Every single other one of them seems to be like, that was last year, this is this year, or some other cliche like that. But Lanning's like, no, we're focused on that. That's where our mind's at. And I bet you better believe if he's saying that publicly, it's that 100-fold in the locker room, on the practice field. Again, the master motivator. We saw it earlier this season against Colorado when the Buffaloes were reigning high and dominating the college football world in terms of the media attention. Lanning motivated his guys, famously saying they're playing for clicks, Oregon's playing for win. And of course, Oregon went out and absolutely obliterated Colorado. This is that same kind of deal we're seeing from Lanning here. And again, it just shows that master motivation, which is perfect when you have a team. And I think we can all agree with this, Mize. This is a team that can go to the college football playoff and make some serious noise. They've got a Heisman caliber quarterback. They've got great receivers, good defense, great offensive line, solid special teams. They're not perfect, but I honestly think they're better than Washington. I think they should have beaten Washington the first time around. I think a lot of Oregon Ducks fans will realize that, and I think they will beat Washington if they get another crack at them. Lanning realizes that, and that's why he's got to make sure his guys are motivated. Normally they should be against a rivalry game, but like I said, it's tough this time of year. But keeping his guys motivated, keeping that energy up as they get ready to play Oregon State. I tell you what, Lanning's doing a great job. I think this is a masterclass move in terms of him and his coaching staff, keeping his players focused, doing it a little differently than the cliches that we normally hear from coaches. But I think it's the right strategy to take in this situation.